Tonight, before sleep finds you, I want you to consider something most people never realize. Some minds do not move through the world lightly. Some nervous systems absorb everything: the energy in conversations, the tension hidden behind silence, the emotional weight people pretend not to carry. And if you've spent your life feeling too sensitive, too overwhelmed, too emotionally exhausted by ordinary days, there may be a reason your body asks for more rest than other people seem to need. Because sensitivity is not simply emotional, it is neurological. Tonight, as the world grows quieter around you, we're going to explore the hidden connection between highly sensitive minds and sleep, why certain brains struggle to fully switch off, why overstimulation follows you into the night, and why deep rest becomes essential for people who process life more intensely than most. So, wherever you are right now, maybe staring into darkness with a mind that won't slow down, or carrying the invisible fatigue of constantly thinking, feeling, noticing, allow yourself to stop fighting it for a moment. You do not need to solve yourself tonight. You do not need to become less emotional, less aware, less deeply affected by life. Let your shoulders soften. Unclench your jaw. Take one slow breath in and another. Your nervous system has been working hard for a very long time, far longer than most people can see. Research in psychology and neuroscience now suggests that highly sensitive individuals process sensory and emotional information more deeply at the neurological level, not because they are weak, but because their brains are designed to detect more detail, more emotional nuance, more subtle shifts in the environment. Brain imaging studies have shown increased activation in areas connected to awareness, empathy, emotional meaning, and sensory processing. In other words, your brain may not be overreacting. It may simply be processing more than the average nervous system was built to notice. The slight change in someone's voice, the emotional atmosphere inside a room, the exhaustion after too much noise, conflict, stimulation, or emotional masking. Your body remembers all of it, even when your conscious mind tries to ignore it. And over time, this deeper processing creates a kind of invisible fatigue, the kind many sensitive people carry silently for years without understanding why they feel so drained. Sensitivity is not imagined. It is measurable, partly shaped by genetics, partly shaped by life experience, and deeply connected to the nervous system itself. Some researchers estimate that nearly 1 out of every 4 people may naturally process the world this way, which means there are millions of people lying awake tonight feeling exactly as you do, exhausted by noise, exhausted by emotion, exhausted by constantly being on, and perhaps for the first time in a long while, you can let yourself stop apologizing for needing rest, because your need for quiet may not be weakness at all. It may be wisdom from a nervous system asking for recovery. For many sensitive people, the exhaustion did not begin in adulthood. It began much earlier, long before you had words for it, long before you understood why crowded rooms drained you, why conflict stayed in your body for hours, or why your mind replayed emotional moments long after everyone else moved on. Part of sensitivity is shaped by life experience, but research suggests part of it may have been present from the very beginning. A nervous system naturally built to absorb more information from the world around you, more emotion, more stimulation, more subtle details most people barely notice. Not defective, not dramatic, simply more responsive. Psychologists call this trait sensory processing sensitivity, and it exists on a spectrum. Some people move through life filtering out large amounts of stimulation automatically, but highly sensitive people process much more before the brain decides what is important and what is safe to ignore, which means daily life can become exhausting in ways that are difficult to explain to others. Too much noise, too many decisions, too much emotional tension, too much human energy all at once. And eventually, the nervous system stops feeling rested, even after sleep. In recent years, researchers studying sensitivity and insomnia discovered something deeply important. Sensitive people often experience what scientists call high sleep reactivity, meaning stress affects their sleep far more intensely than average, not because they are mentally weak, but because their nervous systems remain more alert long after the day is over. A stressful conversation that another person forgets within minutes may continue echoing through a sensitive brain for hours. A tense environment, an emotionally draining interaction, even subtle pressure during the day can quietly activate the nervous system deep into the night. And when the body stays alert, sleep becomes difficult. The mind keeps scanning. The thoughts keep moving. The nervous system keeps preparing for something it cannot name. This is why many sensitive people feel exhausted and awake at the same time. Their bodies are tired, but their nervous systems are still listening, still processing, still trying to make sense of everything they absorbed during the day. And perhaps one of the most comforting discoveries in recent sleep research is this: your difficulty sleeping may not mean you are failing at rest. It may mean your nervous system reacts more deeply to stress than most people realize. The problem is not simply stress itself, it is how intensely your mind and body continue carrying it after the moment has passed. And tonight, maybe that means you can stop blaming yourself for needing more quiet, more recovery, more softness, more sleep, because some nervous systems do not heal in noise. They heal in safety, in stillness, in darkness, slowly, patiently, one peaceful night at a time. For a sensitive nervous system, the world rarely becomes fully quiet. Even in silence, the brain continues listening. Recent neuroscience research suggests that highly sensitive people often maintain higher levels of brain activity even during moments of rest, not because they are trying to think so much, but because their minds continue processing information automatically in the background. Subtle sounds, tiny emotional shifts, environmental tension, patterns most people never consciously register. The sensitive brain stays engaged with the world longer than average nervous systems tend to. And over time, that constant awareness becomes exhausting. Imagine walking through an ordinary grocery store. For many people, it's just another quick errand. But for a deeply sensitive mind, the experience is much larger. The bright fluorescent lighting, the overlapping conversations, the crying child somewhere in the distance, the pressure of rushed people moving too quickly, the emotional heaviness in someone's face, the constant stream of movement, noise, color, decision making your brain absorbs, all of it, not intentionally, automatically, and by the time you finally return home, your nervous system has processed far more stimulation than most people realize. This is one reason sensitive people often feel tired in ways that seem invisible to others. Their brains have simply been working harder all day long. Researchers call this cognitive load, the amount of mental energy required to continuously process information. And sensitive minds accumulate that load faster because they process experiences more deeply and more thoroughly. This is where sleep becomes critically important. Sleep is not only physical rest, it is neurological recovery. While you sleep, the brain sorts emotional experiences, strengthens important memories, clears metabolic waste from neural activity, and slowly repairs the strain created by constant stimulation. But when a nervous system spends the entire day in heightened awareness, it needs more recovery at night, more quiet, more darkness, more uninterrupted rest. Not because the person is lazy, not because they are weak, but because the brain has been carrying a heavier processing burden for hours. And perhaps this explains something many sensitive people secretly feel ashamed of. Why they often need more sleep than others seem to need. Why social interaction can feel draining even when enjoyable. Why overstimulation lingers long after the event has ended. Your exhaustion may not be a character flaw. It may simply be the natural cost of processing the world more deeply than most people do. The sensitive brain is not resting less because it is broken. It is recovering from doing more. So tonight, if your body feels tired before your day even fully ends, if your mind feels overloaded by ordinary life, if your nervous system aches for silence, there may be a reason. Your brain has been carrying more than anyone else could see, and now it is asking for rest. As the day goes on, many sensitive people notice something difficult to explain. Their energy slowly disappears, not all at once, but gradually, conversation after conversation, noise after noise, decision after decision, emotion after emotion, until eventually even small things begin to feel overwhelming. This is what overstimulation feels like inside a highly sensitive nervous system. Not weakness, not inability, capacity overload. Researchers studying sensitive individuals found that overstimulation tends to build throughout the day, becoming strongest in the late afternoon and evening, especially after too much social interaction, too much emotional tension, too much noise, or too much sensory input without enough recovery. And for deeply sensitive people, ordinary modern life can quietly become too much for the nervous system to carry continuously. A crowded room, a loud restaurant, constant notifications, stressful conversations, bright lights, the pressure to remain emotionally available for everyone around you. Your brain processes all of it, and eventually the nervous system begins signaling that it has reached its limit. This can feel like emotional exhaustion, mental fog, irritability, physical tension in the chest or shoulders, or the strange feeling of wanting to disappear from the world for a while just to finally breathe again. Many sensitive people feel guilty for this. They wonder why normal life feels so draining. But neuroscience suggests something important. Your nervous system may simply become saturated faster because it is processing more information at deeper levels. And once overstimulation builds, sleep becomes both more necessary and more difficult. This is the painful contradiction sensitive people often live with. The body feels exhausted, but the nervous system remains activated. The mind keeps replaying interactions. The emotions stay unfinished. The brain continues sorting through stimulation long after the world has gone quiet. Research has found that fatigue itself can increase sensitivity to overstimulation even further, which creates a cycle many people unknowingly live inside for years. Overstimulation leads to exhaustion. Exhaustion lowers emotional resilience. Lower resilience causes even more overstimulation the next day, and eventually the nervous system becomes trapped in a near constant state of tension, not because the person is failing, but because the brain has not fully recovered in a very long time. This is why withdrawal can sometimes feel necessary for sensitive people, not avoidance. Recovery, the nervous system asking for silence after carrying too much input for too long. And perhaps this is also why nighttime feels emotionally different for deeply sensitive minds. The darkness finally removes some of the stimulation. The world becomes quieter. The nervous system begins loosening its grip, and underneath all the exhaustion, there is often a desperate need, not just for sleep, but for peace. Researchers studying emotional processing discovered that sensitive brains show stronger activation when exposed to emotionally charged environments. Negative tension, conflict, threatening situations, even subtle emotional discomfort. The brain works harder trying to interpret, predict, and emotionally process what is happening, which means by the end of the day, your mind may have been carrying far more emotional weight than anyone around you realized. And tonight, your nervous system is still trying to put it all down. For sensitive people, childhood is often where the nervous system first learns whether the world feels safe, not because sensitivity was created there, but because sensitivity was shaped there. A deeply sensitive child notices more than adults usually realize. The tension in a parent's voice, the emotional atmosphere in the house, the unpredictability, the criticism, the silence after conflict, the feeling of needing to stay alert all the time. And when a sensitive nervous system grows inside an environment where emotional safety feels uncertain, the brain adapts. It learns vigilance. It learns scanning. It learns to stay prepared, even during rest. This is why many deeply sensitive adults struggle to fully relax long after difficult experiences have ended. Their bodies may be physically safe, but their nervous systems still expect emotional impact to arrive at any moment. And over time, alertness becomes automatic. The mind keeps listening, the body keeps bracing, sleep becomes lighter, easier to interrupt, harder to fully surrender into. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your nervous system learned survival before it learned safety. And for many sensitive people, rest itself can begin to feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Silence feels strange. Stillness feels exposed. Relaxation feels undeserved. So the brain keeps working, keeps scanning, keeps preparing for tomorrow before tonight has even ended. Researchers now understand that sensitivity expresses itself in different ways. Some people become overwhelmed quickly by busy environments and emotional intensity. Others feel physically affected by bright lights, loud sounds, textures, or sensory discomfort. And some experience deep emotional and aesthetic sensitivity, feeling profoundly moved by music, beauty, nature, memory, or human emotion. The same nervous system that becomes exhausted by chaos can also experience beauty more deeply than most people ever will. Sensitive minds often feel life intensely in both directions, the pain and the wonder, the exhaustion and the meaning. But here is the difficult paradox many sensitive people quietly live with. Your nervous system needs deep rest more than average, while simultaneously struggling to fully enter it. Because the brain that notices everything has difficulty letting go of awareness completely, even at night, even in silence. Part of your mind remains awake, listening for emotional danger, monitoring tension, processing unfinished experiences from the day. What once may have helped humans survive in uncertain environments now keeps modern nervous systems overstimulated long after the threat is gone. And this can create a painful misunderstanding. Sensitive people often begin believing they are simply bad at coping, that they are too emotional, too tired, too weak, too needy for rest. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Your need for recovery is not laziness. It is proportional to how much your nervous system processes every single day. The more deeply a brain processes emotion, stimulation, and social information, the more restoration it requires afterward, which means your exhaustion may not be evidence of weakness at all. It may be evidence that your brain has been working harder than anyone can see. And when sensitive people do not get enough rest, the effects often become amplified. Emotions feel sharper, stress feels heavier, decision making becomes harder. The nervous system loses resilience more quickly, not because you are failing, but because an already overworked system has not fully recovered yet. So tonight, maybe your body is not asking you to push harder. Maybe it is asking for something far more important: safety, stillness, darkness, and enough rest for your nervous system to finally soften its grip on the world. When a sensitive nervous system does not get enough rest, the effects are rarely subtle. Emotions feel heavier, small problems feel enormous, noise becomes unbearable, patience disappears faster. The mind struggles to regulate itself the way it normally can, and many people blame themselves for this. They call themselves dramatic, too emotional, too reactive. But often, these are not personality flaws. They are signs of a nervous system running without enough recovery. Sleep is not passive for the brain. It is active restoration. Throughout the night, your brain moves through carefully organized sleep cycles: light sleep, deep, slow wave sleep, REM sleep. Each stage serves a different purpose. And for sensitive people, these stages become incredibly important because the brain has more emotional and sensory information to process from the day before. Deep sleep is where the nervous system finally begins repairing itself. This is when the brain clears accumulated waste from neural activity, restores depleted systems, and slowly releases some of the emotional weight carried during the day. Without enough deep sleep, you wake up still carrying yesterday inside your body, still tense, still overstimulated, still emotionally overloaded before the day even begins. And then there is REM sleep, the stage most connected to emotional processing and memory integration. During REM sleep, the brain revisits emotional experiences, sorts through feelings, connects memories, and attempts to make emotional sense of what happened while you were awake. For highly sensitive people, this process matters deeply because sensitive minds collect more emotional detail during the day than most people realize. More emotional nuance, more tension, more meaning, more subtle social information. and all of it must eventually be processed somewhere. Often, that processing happens during sleep. This is why disrupted sleep can feel devastating for sensitive individuals. When REM sleep becomes fragmented or shortened, the emotional residue from yesterday does not fully settle. You wake up emotionally unfinished, more reactive, more fragile, less capable of handling stress that normally would not overwhelm you, not because you are weak, but because your brain did not complete the emotional recovery process it desperately needed overnight. And over time, this creates something many sensitive people unknowingly carry: sleep debt, not just physical tiredness, accumulated nervous system exhaustion, night after night of incomplete recovery, weeks of emotional processing left unfinished, months of overstimulation without enough true restoration. And the difficult truth is, one good night of sleep often cannot fully repair prolonged exhaustion, especially for nervous systems that already process life at higher intensity. Sensitive people frequently try to force themselves to function normally while running on depleted emotional reserves. They keep pushing, keep performing, keep pretending they are fine, even while their nervous systems quietly beg for rest. But your brain keeps a record of every unrecovered night, every hour of emotional processing interrupted, every evening your nervous system remained alert instead of safe enough to fully let go. And eventually, the exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore. So tonight, perhaps your tiredness is not failure. Perhaps your body is finally telling the truth your mind has been trying to outwork for too long. That your nervous system needs more than productivity. It needs recovery, deep, uninterrupted, healing rest. For a highly sensitive nervous system, sleep loss does not disappear quickly. Its effects linger. One difficult night becomes two, two become a week, and eventually the body begins living in a state of quiet depletion that feels almost normal. Many sensitive people become so accustomed to exhaustion, they forget what true rest even feels like. Because when your brain processes life more deeply than average, missing sleep is not simply losing time. It is losing emotional recovery, mental repair, nervous system healing, and the brain remembers that loss, especially sensitive brains. Research suggests that sensitive individuals are more deeply affected by disrupted sleep and often recover more slowly once exhaustion accumulates, which means your body may carry the effects of poor sleep long after other people seem unaffected. And perhaps this explains something frustrating you may know very well: why you can feel completely exhausted, yet still unable to fall asleep. The body is tired, but the nervous system is still alert, still processing conversations, still replaying emotions, still monitoring the environment, still searching for resolution somewhere inside the unfinished thoughts. Falling asleep requires the brain to release awareness, to soften vigilance, to trust enough to let go. But for sensitive minds, that release does not happen instantly. Your nervous system has spent the entire day noticing everything: the emotional atmosphere, the stress in other people, the stimulation, the pressure, the subtle discomforts most people filter out automatically. And by nighttime, the brain does not always know how to stop. So you lie there in darkness, longing for rest while your thoughts continue moving. This is one reason sensitive people often feel tired but wired, exhausted physically, awake neurologically. Even small environmental details can keep the nervous system engaged. A faint electronic hum, a small amount of light, an uncomfortable fabric texture, a room that feels slightly too warm, distant sounds outside the window, things other people barely notice. Your nervous system continues tracking automatically, not because you are difficult, because your brain was designed to detect subtle changes in the environment. And when the nervous system never fully feels safe, deep sleep becomes harder to access. This is why the sleep environment matters so much for sensitive people. Your brain does not relax through force. It relaxes through safety signals: softness, darkness, quiet, comfort, gentle sensory experiences that tell the nervous system it no longer needs to remain alert. And there is something beautiful hidden inside this sensitivity too. The same nervous system that becomes overwhelmed by harsh stimulation can also be deeply soothed by beauty, soft lighting, calming music, the feeling of clean sheets, rain against the window, warm ambient light in a quiet room, a peaceful voice speaking slowly in the dark. Sensitive people often experience beauty with extraordinary emotional depth. Their nervous systems respond powerfully not only to stress, but also to gentleness, which means healing is often sensory too. The right environment can slowly teach the body that rest is safe again. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually, night after night, breath after breath. until the nervous system finally begins loosening its hold on the world and allows sleep to arrive naturally. For sensitive people, comfort is not a luxury, it is regulation. The soft blanket, the dim lighting, the quiet room, the calming music, the peaceful atmosphere before sleep. These are not small preferences. They are signals that help your nervous system finally understand you are safe now. Because sensitive minds do not simply experience environments intellectually, they experience them emotionally, physically, neurologically, and perhaps nowhere is this more true than with empathy. Many highly sensitive people move through life absorbing emotions they were never meant to carry alone. The stress in someone's voice, the sadness hidden behind a smile, the anxiety in a crowded room, the emotional exhaustion of the people around them. Sensitive individuals often do not merely observe these emotions, they feel them inside their own nervous systems, and by the end of the day, many are carrying emotional weight that does not fully belong to them, which makes nighttime especially complicated. Because when you finally lie down in silence, your nervous system is not only calming your own emotions, it is also trying to release everything it absorbed from everyone else. The body remembers emotional energy even when the conscious mind tries to move past it. This is why sensitive people often feel emotionally heavy without fully understanding why. They have been emotionally resonating with the world all day long. And all of that emotional information requires processing, often during sleep. This deeper emotional responsiveness can also increase vulnerability to anxiety and depression when stress becomes chronic or environments remain emotionally overwhelming for too long. Not because sensitivity is a disorder, but because a highly responsive nervous system reacts more strongly to both harmful and healing experiences. Sensitive people are affected more deeply by criticism, but often helped more deeply by kindness too, more wounded by chaos, but also more restored by peace, more impacted by emotional pain, but often more capable of profound empathy, connection, beauty, and healing. Sensitivity amplifies experience in every direction, and this is why sleep matters so much. For sensitive people, sleep is not just rest, it is emotional protection, a reset for an overstimulated nervous system, a nightly recovery process that helps regulate emotion before exhaustion turns into anxiety or emotional overwhelm turns into hopelessness. Without enough restorative sleep, the nervous system loses resilience. Stress feels sharper. Emotions become harder to regulate. The world begins feeling emotionally louder than it already is. But recent research also offers something hopeful. Sensitive people often respond extremely well to supportive environments and intentional healing practices once their nervous systems begin receiving what they actually need. Not punishment, not constant pressure, not forcing themselves to toughen up, but safety, consistency, gentleness, recovery. And this includes the way they approach sleep. Many sensitive people spend years believing they simply need to try harder to sleep, but healing often begins when they stop fighting their nervous system and start supporting it instead. A calmer evening routine, reduced stimulation before bed, warm lighting, gentle sounds, a sleep environment designed for softness rather than survival. Your sleep struggles are not proof that your body is failing you. They may simply be signs that your nervous system has been carrying too much for too long. And tonight, perhaps rest does not require becoming less sensitive. Perhaps it begins by finally understanding the sensitive mind with compassion instead of frustration. By now, perhaps you're beginning to understand something important about yourself. Your exhaustion is not imagined. Your sensitivity is not all in your head. And your need for deeper rest is not a personal failure. Your nervous system is real, biological, measurable, built to process the world with greater depth and intensity than most people realize, which means your brain spends the day doing far more invisible work than anyone can see. More emotional processing, more sensory awareness, more internal analysis, more attention to subtle shifts in people, environments, and experiences. And eventually, that work requires recovery, not because you are weak, but because intense processing consumes energy, the same way muscles need rest after strain. The nervous system needs restoration after constant emotional and sensory input. And perhaps this is why so many sensitive people secretly feel exhausted even when they haven't done enough by society's standards, because their brains have been working non-stop in ways the outside world cannot measure. The difficult part is this: stress does not leave your system easily. For some people, stress passes through quickly. Their nervous systems experience tension and then release it. But sensitive nervous systems often hold on to experiences long after the moment has ended. Researchers call this sleep reactivity, the degree to which stress continues affecting your ability to rest. and sensitive individuals often have extremely high sleep reactivity, meaning the nervous system keeps carrying emotional activation into the night. A stressful meeting in the morning, an awkward conversation in the afternoon, conflict, noise, pressure, emotional tension. Most people move on from these experiences relatively quickly, but sensitive minds continue processing them for hours, sometimes unconsciously. The body remains alert. The brain keeps replaying details. The nervous system stays partially activated long after the environment becomes quiet. And this is why nighttime can feel so confusing for deeply sensitive people. You finally lie down exhausted, yet sleep still refuses to arrive. Not because your body does not need rest, but because your nervous system has not fully realized the danger is over. The emotional imprint of the day is still moving through you, and sensitive brains process stress deeply. Research suggests emotionally charged experiences create stronger activation in areas related to emotional memory, awareness, and sensory integration, meaning your brain does not simply record stressful moments, it absorbs them, analyzes them, revisits them, attempts to understand them from every angle, even when you desperately want to let go. So by the time evening arrives, your nervous system has often been carrying stimulation for 12 or 14 hours without interruption. You wake up already noticing everything: the sounds outside, the emotional tone in the room, the pressure waiting for you during the day, your own body sensations, your own thoughts. And then the stimulation continues, conversation after conversation, notification after notification, decision after decision, emotion after emotion. By late afternoon, the nervous system begins nearing saturation, and by nighttime, many sensitive people feel emotionally flooded without fully understanding why. They crave silence, darkness, distance from the world, not because they hate life, but because their nervous systems have been open to too much input for too long. And even after they finally return home, the brain keeps processing, still sorting, still replaying, still carrying. This is why rest for sensitive people cannot begin only at bedtime. The nervous system needs gradual decompression, signals of safety, permission to stop monitoring the world. So tonight, notice your breathing. Notice the weight of your body slowly sinking into rest. You do not need to solve every thought before sleep arrives. You do not need to carry everyone else's emotions into tomorrow. Your nervous system has been protecting you all day long. Now it deserves permission to soften. For many sensitive people, nighttime does not feel peaceful immediately, even after the lights go out, even after the world becomes quiet. The nervous system is still moving. Your body may be lying still in bed, but internally, your mind is still reverberating with the entire day. The conversations, the tension, the unfinished emotions, the overstimulation, the pressure your nervous system absorbed hour after hour without fully releasing, and somehow you are expected to simply relax and fall asleep. But sensitive nervous systems rarely switch off instantly. They transition slowly because all day long your brain has been operating in a heightened state of awareness, monitoring, processing, responding, adjusting. The nervous system cannot sprint emotionally for 12 hours, then suddenly drift peacefully into sleep within a few minutes. It needs decompression. Researchers often describe the nervous system as balancing in between two primary states. One prepares the body for alertness, vigilance, and stress. The other allows restoration, healing, slowing down, and sleep. And for highly sensitive people, the alert system tends to stay activated much longer after stimulation ends. This is why many sensitive individuals need extended wind down time before bed, not because they are difficult, but because their nervous systems need gradual signals that the world is finally becoming safe enough to stop scanning. Dimmer lights, slower sounds, gentler conversations, less stimulation, less emotional intensity. The nervous system needs a softer landing before sleep becomes possible. And perhaps this explains why rushing directly from stress into bed so often fails. Your body has not fully arrived in rest yet. It is still carrying the momentum of the day. Studies on sensitive children reveal something deeply important that continues into adulthood. Sensitive nervous systems accumulate more emotional and sensory information during the day and therefore require more recovery time at night. The brain is not simply resting during sleep, it is processing enormous amounts of unfinished information, sorting memories, regulating emotions, repairing overstimulated neural systems, integrating experiences into understanding. Without enough restorative sleep, that processing remains incomplete, and the next day begins with emotional residue still sitting inside the nervous system. This is why poor sleep affects sensitive people so intensely. The body becomes emotionally raw. Stress tolerance shrinks. Overstimulation arrives faster. Even ordinary life begins feeling too loud, too fast, too emotionally demanding. Not because you are weak, because your nervous system did not fully recover, and deep sleep plays an especially important role in this recovery process. During the deepest stages of sleep, the brain begins restoring itself at profound levels, clearing metabolic waste, repairing neural strain, consolidating memory, releasing accumulated emotional tension from the day before. Without enough deep sleep, the nervous system carries yesterday into tomorrow, still overloaded, still unfinished, still tired in ways that sleep alone did not fully repair. And then comes REM sleep, the stage deeply connected to emotional processing. This is when the brain revisits emotional experiences and attempts to organize them into something the nervous system can finally understand and release. For sensitive minds, this nightly emotional processing becomes essential because sensitive people experience life with greater emotional intensity during waking hours, more nuance, more emotional detail, more internal reflection, more subconscious meaning attached to experiences. And all of that emotional information must eventually be processed somewhere. Often it happens in the dark, quietly, while you sleep, which means your need for deep rest is not indulgence. It is neurological maintenance for a nervous system that experiences the world more deeply than most people will ever realize. So tonight, do not rush yourself toward sleep. Let your nervous system descend slowly, like water becoming still after a long storm, breath by breath, thought by thought, until the mind no longer feels responsible for carrying the entire world alone. For sensitive people, sleep is never only physical, it is emotional processing too. While the body lies still in darkness, the brain continues quietly working through the emotional weight of the day, not just the events themselves, but the feeling inside those events, the subtle disappointment in someone's voice, the tension hidden inside a conversation, the emotional atmosphere of a room, the sadness you sensed but never spoke about. Sensitive minds absorb emotional texture in extraordinary detail, and at night, the brain attempts to sort through all of it, especially during REM sleep, the stage deeply connected to emotional integration. This is when emotional memories are revisited, organized, softened, and woven into a larger understanding of experience. But when REM sleep becomes disrupted, that emotional processing remains unfinished, and the next morning you wake carrying emotional residue that was never fully released, still heavy, still emotionally reactive, still quietly burdened by yesterday. Many sensitive people believe they are too emotional without realizing their nervous systems simply did not finish processing what they absorbed, and the environment around sleep matters far more than most people understand, because your nervous system notices everything: the faint sound in another room, a small amount of light leaking through curtains, temperature changes, uncomfortable textures, subtle environmental discomforts others barely register. Your brain keeps responding to these signals automatically, even while trying to rest, which means creating the right sleep environment is not indulgence for sensitive people. It is nervous system support: darkness, quiet, soft textures, comfortable temperature, gentle sounds, emotional calm. These are not luxuries. They are biological signals that help your brain finally stop scanning the environment for stimulation. And perhaps even more important than physical comfort is emotional safety. Sensitive people do not only absorb sensory information, they absorb emotional atmosphere too. If the home feels tense, if conflict happened before bed, if the room itself carries emotional stress associations, the nervous system often remains partially alert, even in silence, because emotionally attuned brains continue reading emotional environments long after words stop being spoken. This is why peaceful nighttime rituals matter so deeply. Soft lighting, quiet music, gentle routines, moments that emotionally separate the stress of the day from the safety of the night. Your nervous system needs help understanding the world is no longer demanding anything from you. And there is another reason your sleep feels different from other people's. The same neurochemistry involved in sensitivity also affects sleep itself. The brain chemicals connected to emotional responsiveness and sensory processing are closely tied to alertness, mood regulation, and sleep rhythms, meaning your sensitivity and your sleep are not separate problems. They are deeply connected parts of the same nervous system. This is why trying to force sleep often fails for highly sensitive people. You cannot overpower a vigilant nervous system with willpower. The body must feel safe enough to let go first. And sometimes that creates painful confusion. You feel exhausted, yet still awake. Your body desperately wants rest, but your nervous system remains too activated to surrender fully into sleep. Many sensitive people carry guilt about this. They compare themselves to people who fall asleep easily, need less rest, or seem unaffected by stress and stimulation. And slowly they begin believing they are weak for needing more recovery. But comparison becomes meaningless once you understand this truth. Different nervous systems require different forms of care. Your brain has been processing more all day long, more emotion, more stimulation, more sensory information, more emotional nuance. Of course, it needs more restoration afterward. Your need for rest is not excessive. It is proportional to the invisible work your nervous system performs every single day. So tonight, instead of criticizing yourself for needing quiet, for needing softness, for needing sleep, perhaps you can finally understand your exhaustion with compassion, not as weakness, but as the natural consequence of feeling the world so deeply. By now, you may be realizing something that changes the way you see yourself. Your nervous system was never weak, it was overloaded. There is a difference. Sensitive brains process more information, more emotion, more sensory detail, more subtle social signals. And all of that invisible processing requires energy, real energy, the kind that leaves you mentally exhausted after environments other people barely notice, the kind that makes rest feel necessary instead of optional. This is not a personality flaw. It is biology, the same way some bodies naturally require more hydration, more recovery, or more calories. Sensitive nervous systems require more restoration, more decompression, more sleep, not because they are incapable, but because they are carrying a larger processing burden every single day. And perhaps the hardest part for many sensitive people is not the exhaustion itself, it is the guilt. Watching others seem fine with less sleep, less quiet, less emotional recovery, wondering why ordinary life feels so much heavier for you, slowly convincing yourself that your needs are too much. But self-judgment does not calm the nervous system. It increases the stress already living inside it. And this is where healing often begins, not by forcing yourself to become less sensitive, but by finally understanding your nervous system with compassion instead of criticism. Recent therapeutic approaches for sensitive individuals show something deeply hopeful. Sensitive people often respond extremely well to supportive, intentional healing practices. Mindfulness based approaches, for example, help create distance between awareness and overstimulation, not by shutting down emotion, but by teaching the nervous system that every thought does not require immediate emotional engagement. Every sensation does not require alarm. Every feeling does not need to become a storm inside the body. Other sleep focused therapies help retrain the nervous system's relationship with bedtime itself. Because after years of exhaustion, frustration, and hypervigilance, many sensitive people unconsciously begin associating nighttime with struggle instead of safety. The bed becomes a place of pressure, a place where the mind worries about whether sleep will come, and the nervous system stays alert in anticipation. Healing often means rebuilding trust with rest itself, slowly teaching the body you no longer need to stay awake to stay safe. And perhaps this requires a completely different relationship with sleep than the one most people are taught. Not sleep as productivity, not sleep as another task to accomplish perfectly, but sleep as nervous system care, as emotional recovery, as biological compassion for a brain that experiences life intensely. Sensitive nervous systems often need longer wind down periods, gentler evenings, consistent routines, reduced stimulation before bed, soft transitions out of the chaos of the day, not because they are fragile, but because they remain deeply responsive to their environments long after stimulation ends. And when you begin working with your nervous system instead of fighting it, something slowly changes. Sleep stops feeling like an enemy and starts becoming a form of healing again. By now, a pattern may be becoming clear. Your sensitivity affects sleep in many interconnected ways. Stress lingers longer, emotions process more deeply, environmental stimulation affects you more intensely, empathy causes you to carry emotional energy that was never fully yours. And the same nervous system that desperately needs rest often struggles the hardest to reach it. But none of this means you are broken. It means your brain requires a different kind of care than the world usually teaches people to give themselves. So tonight, perhaps the goal is not to force yourself into sleep. Perhaps the goal is simply to stop fighting the nervous system that has been trying to protect you all along and let it finally feel understood. Perhaps the most important thing we've discovered tonight is this: your struggle with sleep is not a moral failure. It is not proof that you are weak, undisciplined, broken, or incapable of handling life correctly. It is the natural consequence of living with a nervous system that experiences the world more intensely than most people realize. And understanding that changes something important, because understanding creates compassion, and compassion calms the nervous system in ways self-criticism never can. For so many sensitive people, bedtime becomes another performance, another place to feel frustrated with themselves, another reminder that rest feels difficult while everyone else seems to drift effortlessly into sleep. But your brain has never been operating under the same conditions. Your nervous system has been carrying more input all day long, more emotion, more stimulation, more internal processing, more subtle awareness. Of course, rest feels different for you. Take a slow breath now. Notice the weight of your body against the bed. Notice how much tension your nervous system has been carrying without your conscious awareness. The jaw, the shoulders, the chest, the stomach. Your body has been bracing itself against the world for hours, and tonight, perhaps it no longer needs to. You are not the only sensitive person lying awake right now. There are countless others quietly carrying invisible emotional exhaustion into the darkness each night. People who feel too much, think too deeply, stay emotionally alert far too long. And maybe hearing this allows part of your nervous system to finally stop feeling alone. Sleep itself follows rhythms more intricate than most people realize. Throughout the night, the brain moves through repeating cycles of restoration. Some stages focus more on physical repair. Others focus more on emotional processing and memory integration. Early in the night, deeper restorative sleep becomes more dominant. This is when the body repairs itself most intensely, when the brain clears accumulated waste from the day, when the nervous system begins releasing some of the pressure it has been carrying. Later in the night, REM sleep becomes longer and more frequent. This is the stage connected to emotional integration, dreaming, and the processing of emotional experiences. For sensitive people, these later stages matter profoundly because emotionally responsive brains carry more emotional information into sleep each night, more social nuance, more emotional memory, more unresolved feeling, and much of that emotional material gets processed during REM sleep, which means when sensitive people cut sleep short, they often lose critical emotional recovery time without realizing it. The body may physically wake up, but emotionally, the nervous system remains unfinished. And there is another reason sleep can feel so fragile for highly sensitive minds. Your brain is constantly filtering sensory information. Every sound, every movement, every subtle environmental change. Most nervous systems automatically tune much of this out, but sensitive brains often allow more sensory information into conscious awareness, which is helpful during the day when noticing subtle details, but difficult at night when the brain desperately needs to disengage from the outside world. A small sound can feel enormous. A faint light becomes distracting. Tiny environmental changes continue pulling the nervous system back toward awareness, even during sleep. And this creates another layer of exhaustion sensitive people often do not fully understand. Their brains remain partially attentive even while trying to rest, still monitoring, still listening, still processing the environment, which means deep sleep requires more intentional protection, more darkness, more quiet, more emotional calm, not because you are demanding, but because your nervous system was designed for heightened awareness. And tonight, instead of fighting that truth, perhaps you can simply care for it gently, like tending to a mind that has spent the entire day carrying more than anyone else could see. A nervous system that no longer needs to defend itself against the world for one more hour. A body slowly learning that rest is safe now and that sleep does not need to be earned, only allowed. When sensitive people lose sleep, the effects rarely stay small because sleep deprivation does not only create tiredness in a highly sensitive nervous system, it removes the very thing that keeps emotional overwhelm manageable. Without enough rest, feelings become sharper, stress feels heavier, noise becomes harder to tolerate. The nervous system loses flexibility. Things you could normally handle suddenly feel impossible, and this can feel frightening when you do not understand what is happening inside your brain. You may wonder why small problems suddenly feel enormous, why your patience disappears, why emotions feel closer to the surface, why the world becomes too loud, too fast, too emotionally intense. But often, this is not weakness, it is nervous system depletion. Sensitive minds already process sleep with extraordinary depth during waking hours. More emotional nuance, more sensory information, more subconscious awareness. And sleep is the process that helps organize, regulate, and recover from all of that intensity. When sleep is shortened or fragmented, the brain loses access to its primary emotional repair system, and sensitive people feel the effects more powerfully because their nervous systems were already carrying heavier processing loads to begin with. Researchers use the term allostatic load to describe the accumulated burden stress places on the body and brain over time. For highly sensitive people, that burden often builds faster, not because life is objectively harder, but because the nervous system responds more deeply to experiences that others recover from more quickly. Stress leaves a stronger imprint. Emotional tension lingers longer. Overstimulation accumulates more rapidly, and without enough restorative sleep, the nervous system never fully returns to baseline. The body keeps carrying yesterday's stress into tomorrow, then tomorrow's stress into the next day, until exhaustion stops feeling temporary and starts feeling like your entire personality. But it is not your personality. It is accumulated nervous system fatigue, and sleep is one of the only times the brain gets an opportunity to release part of that burden. This is why rest matters so profoundly for sensitive people, not as indulgence, not as laziness, as survival level recovery for a nervous system carrying more emotional weight than most people realize. Sensitive people also tend to experience dreams and nightmares more intensely because the sleeping brain continues emotionally processing everything absorbed during waking life. The fears, the stress, the emotional residue from conversations and experiences. And when a nervous system already processes emotion deeply during the day, sleep itself can become emotionally intense too. Dreams feel vivid, emotions feel real, nightmares linger after waking. The brain is still trying to organize overwhelming emotional information while asleep, sometimes successfully, sometimes not completely. And when disturbing dreams repeatedly interrupt sleep, another exhausting cycle begins. Emotional overload disrupts sleep. Poor sleep weakens emotional resilience. Lower resilience increases emotional overwhelm the next day, and the nervous system becomes trapped in chronic overstimulation. There is another piece many sensitive people never consider. Your body may have its own natural rhythm for sleep. Some nervous systems naturally become sleepy earlier. Others process best later into the night. And when sensitive people are forced into schedules deeply misaligned with their natural rhythms. Sleep quality often suffers even more because the nervous system is already working harder to recover. Forcing it into unnatural timing creates additional strain, especially when emotionally restorative sleep stages become shortened. This is why honoring your nervous system matters. Not perfectly, not obsessively, but compassionately. Your body has rhythms, limits, needs, and sensitive people often spend years trying to override those needs in order to function like everyone else, pushing through exhaustion, ignoring overstimulation, treating recovery like weakness until the nervous system finally begins demanding attention. So tonight, perhaps your exhaustion is not something to fight against anymore. Perhaps it is information, a quiet message from your nervous system saying, I cannot keep carrying this much without rest. And maybe listening to that message is not weakness after all. Maybe it is wisdom. For a sensitive nervous system, routine is not boring, it is calming. Predictability tells the brain it no longer needs to stay alert for sudden change. And for highly sensitive people, that matters deeply because your nervous system spends much of the day adapting to noise, to emotional shifts, to social expectations, to stimulation, to unpredictability. By nighttime, the brain is exhausted from constantly adjusting itself to the world, which is why consistent evening rituals can feel surprisingly powerful. Not because routines are magical, but because repetition creates safety signals for the nervous system. The same dim lights, the same calming music, the same cup of tea, the same slower pace each night. Over time, your brain begins recognizing these patterns as signs that vigilance is no longer necessary. The nervous system slowly starts preparing for rest before sleep even begins. And sensitive brains often need this longer transition, not 10 rushed minutes before bed, but gradual descent, a slower movement out of stimulation and into stillness. Many sensitive people struggle because they try to enter sleep directly from mental overload, scrolling, thinking, solving problems, absorbing information until the final moment before bed, and then wondering why the nervous system cannot suddenly become quiet. But the sensitive brain does not shut down abruptly. It unwinds gradually, like water slowly settling after being disturbed all day long. There is another challenge many sensitive people quietly carry into the night: rumination, the endless replaying of thoughts, conversations, emotions, and imagined futures. not because the mind wants suffering, but because deep processing brains naturally search for understanding. The nervous system keep revisiting emotional experiences, trying to resolve them completely before allowing rest, replaying conversations, analyzing tone, imagining different outcomes, trying to emotionally solve tomorrow before it arrives. And at night, this deep processing can accidentally turn inward endlessly. The mind circles itself, searching for certainty it cannot fully find, which keeps the brain active when it desperately needs softness instead. And perhaps the goal is not to force thoughts away. Sensitive minds rarely respond well to force. Perhaps the goal is simply noticing when the brain has shifted from reflection into exhaustion and gently allowing unresolved things to remain unresolved until morning. Not every emotion must be solved tonight. Not every fear needs an answer before sleep. Some thoughts can rest unfinished, just like you. Even movement and exercise affect sensitive nervous systems differently. Gentle movement often helps release accumulated tension from the body. Walking quietly, stretching slowly, swimming, yoga, breathing deeply. These forms of movement calm the nervous system while helping the body release stress physically. But overly intense environments, competitive pressure, loud stimulation, high adrenaline activity late at night can sometimes leave the nervous system even more activated afterward. Sensitive bodies often need movement that restores rather than overwhelms. Movement that softens the body instead of demanding more from it. And perhaps this is the deeper truth emerging through everything we've explored tonight. Your nervous system is not wrong for needing different care, different rhythms, different environments, different forms of recovery. The world often teaches sensitive people to judge themselves for these needs, to call themselves too much, too emotional, too tired, too affected by everything. But what if your nervous system is not excessive? What if it is simply operating exactly according to its design? A mind that processes deeply will naturally need deeper recovery. A nervous system that notices more will naturally need more rest from stimulation. A heart that feels intensely will naturally require more time to emotionally restore itself. None of this is failure. It is simply biology expressed through experience. And tonight, you do not need to apologize for the kind of nervous system you have. You only need to care for it gently enough that it finally feels safe to rest. The moment sensitive people begin understanding their nervous system, something softens inside them because understanding replaces shame and compassion begins replacing the constant pressure to be less affected. For so long, many sensitive people have tried to force themselves into the shape of a world that moves too fast for their nervous systems, trying not to feel so much, trying not to need so much recovery, trying not to become overwhelmed by things others seem unaffected by. But exhaustion grows whenever you constantly fight your own biology, and healing often begins the moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What does my nervous system actually need?" Take a slow breath now. Notice how your body feels in this moment, perhaps heavier, softer, a little less guarded than before. Your nervous system has been carrying enormous invisible weight all day long. Other people's emotions, noise, pressure, endless stimulation, the emotional burden of constantly noticing everything. And perhaps tonight you no longer need to hold on to all of it. Sleep changes our relationship with time. In waking life, the nervous system remains tense, alert, moving constantly toward the next responsibility. But sleep slows everything down. It creates a space where the body can finally stop performing, where emotional tension begins dissolving quietly beneath awareness, where the nervous system no longer has to carry the entire world at once. Imagine the stimulation of the day slowly loosening its grip on you now, the conversations fading, the pressure fading, the emotional noise softening into distance. Nothing needs solving in this moment. Nothing needs fixing before rest arrives. The mind can pause. And one reason darkness matters so profoundly for sensitive people is because their nervous systems respond intensely to even small amounts of sensory input. Light, especially. Tiny sources of light many people barely notice. A glowing device, street light through curtains, a small electronic indicator in the room. Sensitive brains continue detecting these signals long after other nervous systems tune them out automatically. And because light directly affects the brain's sleep rhythms, even subtle stimulation can quietly interfere with the body's ability to fully descend into rest. This is why darkness is not indulgence for sensitive people. It is support for a nervous system that remains highly responsive to the environment even at night. The same is true for sound. Sensitive nervous systems often continue monitoring the environment while trying to sleep. Unexpected sounds, changes in rhythm, small disturbances others barely register. Your brain keeps listening, not because you are difficult, but because awareness became deeply wired into the nervous system long ago. For much of human history, this heightened sensitivity may have protected people from danger. The ability to notice subtle changes, small disturbances, environmental shifts helped humans survive. But modern life surrounds the nervous system with endless stimulation, traffic, electronics, mechanical hums, artificial light, constant noise that the sensitive brain continues trying to process, even while exhausted, which is why many sensitive people sleep best in environments designed for softness, gentle sound, consistent quiet, darkness, comfort, predictability, not because they are demanding, but because their nervous systems are still listening for safety signals while they sleep. Even temperature and physical texture matter deeply. A room too warm, fabric that feels uncomfortable, blankets too heavy or too light, a subtle irritation against the skin. The nervous system keeps responding to these details automatically, and when the body cannot fully relax physically, the brain often struggles to relax emotionally too. Sensitive people do not simply sleep with their minds, they sleep with their entire nervous systems. Every sensory detail either helping the body soften or quietly keeping part of it alert, which means creating comfort is not weakness, it is wisdom. Your body already knows how to rest. It has always known. It simply needs an environment gentle enough to finally let go. So tonight, perhaps you can stop judging your sensitivity for one moment and instead care for it the way you would care for anything that has been carrying too much for too long. Softly, patiently, without shame, until the nervous system slowly understands it is safe to sleep now. For sensitive people, comfort is not optional during sleep. It is part of the nervous system's ability to finally let go. Most people adapt quickly to physical sensations in the background, a wrinkle in the sheets, an uncomfortable fabric, a room slightly too warm, the weight of clothing against the skin. But sensitive nervous systems continue registering these sensations long after others stop noticing them. The brain keeps monitoring discomfort automatically, which means even small physical irritations can quietly prevent deep relaxation. Your skin is constantly communicating with the nervous system. Every texture, every temperature, every point of contact, and sensitive bodies often remain highly aware of these signals even while trying to sleep. This is why seemingly small things matter so much. Soft sheets, comfortable fabrics, blankets that feel emotionally and physically soothing, a bed that feels safe instead of stimulating. These are not luxuries, they are nervous system support. The body relaxes more deeply when it no longer has to keep responding to discomfort. And perhaps this is also why sensitive people often need longer transitions between the demands of the day and the quiet of the night. Modern life teaches people to move abruptly, work until exhaustion, scroll until bedtime, stay mentally stimulated until the final moment, then suddenly expect the nervous system to sleep peacefully. But sensitive minds rarely work that way. The brain needs decompression, time to emotionally and neurologically step away from stimulation. Some nervous systems require hours of gradual slowing before true rest becomes possible, not because they are inefficient, but because they process experiences more intensely while awake. The nervous system cannot instantly shift from pressure into peace. It needs a bridge between the two, moments of softness, lower light, reduced stimulation, gentle routines that slowly communicate. The day is ending now. Without this transition time, the brain often remains partially activated long into the night, still solving, still processing, still emotionally engaged with the world. Even caffeine affects sensitive nervous systems differently. What feels mild to one person may feel enormous to another. A single afternoon coffee can continue stimulating a sensitive brain long after the body feels physically tired, because sensitivity often extends beyond emotion and into the body's entire neurochemical responsiveness. The nervous system reacts more strongly and sometimes more slowly, which means substances that increase alertness can quietly interfere with sleep for far longer than many people expect. Alcohol creates another difficult illusion. At first, it can seem calming. The nervous system briefly relaxes. The body feels heavier. Sleep feels easier to enter. But later in the night, the brain's emotional processing becomes disrupted. Sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, less restorative. And for sensitive people, this matters deeply because emotionally responsive nervous systems rely heavily on healthy sleep cycles to process emotional experiences from the day. When those cycles are interrupted, the next morning often feels emotionally heavier, more fragile, more overstimulated, less emotionally recovered. This is why sensitive sleep requires gentleness rather than force, not sedating the nervous system into unconsciousness, but creating conditions where the body naturally feels safe enough to surrender into true rest. And perhaps that changes the way you think about your sleep needs. You are not high maintenance. You are highly responsive. Your nervous system notices more, processes more, feels more, and naturally requires more intentional recovery because of it. So tonight, allow yourself to stop treating comfort as weakness. The softer lighting, the quiet environment, the calming rituals, the careful transitions into rest. These are not unnecessary. They are the language your nervous system understands, but a language that slowly tells the body you no longer need to stay alert now. And little by little, the mind begins loosening its grip on the world, enough for sleep to finally arrive. Sensitive nervous systems often respond to substances differently than other people realize. A small amount of stimulation can feel enormous. A small amount of sedation can linger far longer than expected. And this is why sleep support for sensitive people rarely follows standard rules perfectly. Even alcohol, which many people use to relax, often creates hidden problems for sensitive sleep. At first, it may feel calming. The nervous system softens temporarily. The body becomes heavy. Falling asleep seems easier, but later in the night, the brain begins struggling. Sleep becomes fragmented. The nervous system becomes more unstable. Emotional processing during sleep becomes disrupted. And sensitive individuals often wake in the early morning hours feeling strangely alert, restless, emotionally unsettled, or unable to return to sleep because the nervous system is reacting not only to the alcohol itself, but also to the way the body processes and clears it. What initially felt like relief quietly becomes interruption, and sensitive brains feel that interruption deeply. The same can be true with medications and sleep aids. Sensitive nervous systems often respond more intensely to substances designed to affect alertness, mood, or sleep. Lower doses may feel stronger. Side effects may feel amplified. Recovery the next day may feel heavier, not because the person is imagining it, but because highly responsive nervous systems tend to react more strongly to many forms of stimulation and chemical change. This is why sensitive people often need patience and personalization when caring for sleep difficulties. Not one size fits all solutions, but approaches that respect the uniqueness of their nervous systems. Even the seasons can affect sensitive sleep in powerful ways. Winter darkness, summer light, changes in temperature, shifts in daily rhythm. Sensitive brains often respond intensely to environmental changes that alter the body's natural sleep timing. Long summer evenings may keep the nervous system alert longer. Dark winter mornings may affect energy and mood more deeply. And because light plays such a powerful role in regulating sleep hormones, sensitive people often feel seasonal shifts emotionally and physically long before others consciously notice them. Their nervous systems are constantly reading the environment, always adapting, always responding. Pain can also become more disruptive for sensitive individuals. The same nervous system that detects emotional nuance often detects physical discomfort more intensely too. Small aches feel larger. Discomfort becomes harder to ignore. Pain interrupts sleep more easily, and once sleep becomes disrupted, pain tolerance often decreases further the next day, creating another exhausting cycle between discomfort and poor rest. This is why physical comfort matters profoundly for sensitive sleep. The right mattress, supportive positioning, gentle bedding, a body that feels physically safe enough to soften completely. Everything matters because the nervous system notices everything. Even social interaction can linger in the body long after the evening ends. Many sensitive people enjoy connection deeply, but social environments also require enormous emotional processing. Conversations, facial expressions, tone shifts, group energy, the emotional atmosphere inside crowd environments. Sensitive nervous systems absorb all of it, and after social gatherings, many people find themselves physically tired but neurologically overstimulated. The body comes home, but the nervous system is still processing everyone it encountered. This is why evenings often require emotional decompression after social stimulation, quiet, darkness, time alone, not isolation from people, but recovery from constant emotional input. Sensitive people are not antisocial for needing this. Their nervous systems simply require space to settle after carrying so much information all day long. And perhaps tonight you can stop judging yourself for needing gentleness, for needing slower evenings, more careful recovery, more intentional rest. Your nervous system is not asking for too much. It is asking for the conditions that allow it to finally stop protecting itself for a little while. Enough to sleep, enough to heal, enough to quietly become whole again by morning. Many sensitive people know this feeling well. You return home exhausted after spending time with others, yet somehow your nervous system still feels wide awake. Your body is tired, but your mind continues replaying conversations, emotions, facial expressions, subtle social moments. Because for sensitive people, social interaction is never only conversation. It is emotional processing happening in real time. You are reading tone, energy, mood shifts, unspoken tension, subtle emotional signals most people never consciously notice. And even when the experience was enjoyable, your nervous system may still need hours to recover from the amount of information it absorbed. This is why sensitive people often feel tired but wired after social gatherings. The body wants rest, but the nervous system is still sorting through everyone it encountered. And understanding this changes everything, because instead of judging yourself for struggling to sleep afterward, you begin realizing your nervous system simply needs recovery time after stimulation, not isolation. Recovery, there is another source of stimulation many sensitive people underestimate completely: digital content. For sensitive minds, screens affect far more than sleep hormones. The emotional content itself matters. The news story, the argument online, the disturbing image, the emotionally intense movie, the endless stream of human emotion flowing through social media. Sensitive people do not merely consume this information, they absorb it. The nervous system reacts emotionally even when the body remains physically still. And by bedtime, the brain is often carrying emotional activation from dozens of things it never had time to process fully. This is why content boundaries can become an act of nervous system care, not avoidance, protection. Your mind was never designed to emotionally process the suffering, conflict, outrage, and stimulation of thousands of people every night before bed. And many sensitive people carry another hidden challenge into the darkness: creativity. Their minds do not simply think, they connect, generate, imagine, create meaning constantly. The same brain that notices emotional nuance during the day continues forming ideas late into the night. Suddenly a new insight appears, a creative solution, a realization, a memory a connection no one else would have noticed, and the brain becomes activated by its own brilliance. This can feel beautiful and exhausting because creative nervous systems often struggle to stop creating long enough to rest. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is gently write the thought down and allow tomorrow to hold it for a while. Not every idea must be solved tonight. Not every realization needs immediate action. Even creative minds need darkness. Perfectionism creates another quiet burden for sensitive people. The more deeply you notice details, the more aware you become of flaws, mistakes, unfinished things. And eventually, this perfectionism can attach itself to sleep too. Trying to sleep correctly, trying to fall asleep quickly, worrying about getting enough rest, monitoring sleep instead of surrendering to it. But sleep cannot be forced through pressure. The nervous system sleeps best when it no longer feels evaluated. Some nights will be deeper than others. Some nights will feel restless, and removing the pressure to sleep perfectly often becomes part of finally sleeping more peacefully. Trauma can deepen these struggles even further. Sensitive nervous systems already notice danger quickly, and trauma teaches the brain to remain even more vigilant, always scanning, always preparing, always expecting disruption. Even years later, the nervous system may still struggle to fully believe it is safe enough to let go completely, and sleep requires surrender, which is why trauma healing often becomes sleep healing too, slowly teaching the body that rest no longer equals danger, that stillness is safe now, that the night no longer requires constant alertness. Grief affects sensitive sleep profoundly as well, because sensitive people do not only think about loss, they feel it through their entire nervous system. The absence, the longing, the emotional emptiness left behind. And nighttime often makes grief louder. The world becomes quiet enough for emotions to finally rise fully into awareness. For sensitive people, grief may linger deeply because love itself was experienced deeply, not incorrectly, not excessively, deeply. And perhaps this is the thread connecting everything we've explored tonight. Sensitive nervous systems experience life intensely in every direction, stress more deeply, beauty more deeply, connection more deeply, pain more deeply, love more deeply, which means healing and sleep are never simple for you, but they are possible, especially when you stop fighting your nervous system and finally begin listening to what it has been trying to tell you all along, that it does not need more pressure. It needs gentleness, safety, rest, and enough quiet to finally lay the weight of the world down for the night. There are certain seasons of life that place enormous strain on a sensitive nervous system. Pregnancy is one of them. The body changes rapidly, hormones shift constantly, sleep becomes physically interrupted, emotions intensify, and for sensitive women, these changes can feel especially overwhelming because the nervous system is already deeply responsive to physical and emotional sensations. Discomfort may feel stronger, fatigue may feel heavier, anxiety may rise more quickly, and after birth, the constant vigilance of caring for a newborn can push an already sensitive nervous system beyond exhaustion. Interrupted sleep, heightened emotional responsibility, the endless awareness required to care for another human life. Many sensitive mothers silently struggle because their nervous systems were already carrying more before parenthood even began. This is why support matters so profoundly during these periods. Not because you are incapable, but because sensitive nervous systems require recovery, reassurance, and rest more urgently when life becomes physically and emotionally demanding. And perhaps one of the kindest things sensitive people can learn is this: needing help is not failure, it is biology asking for support. Aging changes sleep too, for everyone, but sensitive people often notice these changes earlier and feel them more intensely. Sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, easier to interrupt. The body no longer descends into deep restorative sleep as effortlessly as it once did. And because sensitive people are so aware of internal shifts, they often become painfully conscious of these changes, frustrated by them, anxious about them. But awareness is not always a curse. Sometimes it becomes an advantage. Sensitive people often notice subtle sleep changes before they become severe, which means they can begin adjusting gently, supporting the nervous system earlier instead of waiting until exhaustion becomes overwhelming. Even exercise affects sensitive sleep differently. Movement can help release stress from the body, but timing matters. For some sensitive nervous systems, intense evening workouts keep the brain activated long after the exercise ends. The body becomes physically tired, but neurologically alert. Gentler movement often works differently. A quiet walk, stretching, yoga, Slow evening movement that tells the nervous system we are safe enough to slow down now. And this is why self-awareness matters more than rigid sleep rules. Sensitive people often spend years trying to follow advice designed for average nervous systems. But your body may respond differently. Your sleep rhythms, your recovery needs, your energy patterns, they are deeply personal, and healing begins when you stop forcing your body to follow someone else's blueprint and start listening to your own nervous system instead. Nutrition affects sleep this way too. Sensitive bodies often react strongly to blood sugar shifts, digestive discomfort, dehydration, or foods that create inflammation or stimulation, a heavy meal too late, hunger during the night, digestive tension, energy crashes. The nervous system notices everything, and because the body and brain are deeply connected, physical imbalance often becomes emotional activation too. Sometimes the nervous system wakes not because of anxiety alone, but because the body itself feels unsettled. This is why gentle experimentation matters, not rigid perfection, simply observing what helps your body soften and what quietly keeps it alert. And perhaps few things challenge sensitive sleep more than irregular schedules. The nervous system craves rhythm, predictability, consistency, a body that knows when to wake, when to slow down, when to rest. Shift work, chaotic routines, and constantly changing sleep schedules can leave sensitive nervous systems feeling permanently disoriented. The internal clock struggles to stabilize, and when the body loses rhythm, the nervous system often loses resilience too. This is why routines become deeply healing for sensitive people, not because they are controlling, but because consistency creates safety. The body begins trusting what comes next, and trust is what allows the nervous system to finally release its constant vigilance. So tonight, perhaps your body is not difficult. Perhaps it is simply trying to protect its rhythm in a world that rarely slows down long enough to honor it. And maybe rest begins not by forcing yourself to function like everyone else, but by finally respecting the way your nervous system was designed to move through the world, slowly, deeply, and with far more feeling than most people will ever understand. Sensitive nervous systems often struggle deeply with inconsistency. The body wants rhythm, predictability, a sense of knowing when rest will come. But modern life rarely offers that. Irregular schedules, shift work, late nights followed by early mornings, constant changes in routine, For many people, this creates inconvenience. For sensitive people, it can feel like the nervous system never fully stabilizes. The internal body clock becomes confused. The brain no longer knows when to fully wake or fully rest. And over time, this constant readjustment creates exhaustion that feels almost impossible to recover from. Many sensitive people blame themselves for this fatigue, but your body is responding exactly the way a highly responsive nervous system naturally would. The brain thrives on rhythm because rhythm creates safety, predictable sleep times, predictable light exposure, predictable transitions into rest. These patterns help the nervous system stop preparing constantly for change. And when life disrupts those rhythms repeatedly, sensitive brains often pay a heavier price. This is why intentional sleep routines matter so much when life becomes chaotic. Darkness during daytime sleep, white noise, consistent wind down rituals, gentle transitions before rest, not perfection, support, helping the nervous system adapt to a world that often asks it to ignore its own biological timing. Relationships affect sensitive sleep deeply too, because emotionally responsive people do not stop sensing emotional energy simply because the lights go out. A supportive relationship can help the nervous system soften. Feeling emotionally safe with another person often calms vigilance in ways nothing else can. But tension inside relationships can remain in the body for hours, sometimes all night. Sensitive people notice the subtle things, the shift in tone, the emotional distance, the unspoken frustration, the silence after conflict, and the nervous system continues processing these emotional signals long after the conversation ends. Some sensitive people sleep best alone because solitude reduces sensory and emotional monitoring. Others sleep best beside someone they trust deeply because emotional safety helps the nervous system relax. Neither is wrong. The goal is not normality. The goal is understanding what actually allows your body to rest. And perhaps this requires difficult honesty sometimes about what environments soothe you, what relationships calm you, what emotional conditions quietly keep your nervous system awake. Financial stress can become especially overwhelming for sensitive people too, because sensitive minds do not simply notice present problems. They mentally travel into possible futures, the uncertainty, the consequences, the fear of instability. The brain keeps trying to prepare for every possible outcome. And because emotionally responsive nervous systems experience threat more intensely, financial pressure, can remain inside the body long after practical thinking stops. Not because you are weak, because your nervous system treats uncertainty as something emotionally significant. The body stays alert, sleep becomes lighter, the brain keeps trying to solve tomorrow before it arrives. And all of this affects something called sleep efficiency, not just how long you stay in bed, but how deeply and continuously you actually sleep. Sensitive people often spend long periods physically exhausted, yet neurologically alert, falling asleep slowly, waking frequently, remaining partially aware of the environment even during the night. The body rests incompletely. The nervous system never fully lets go, and this creates a kind of hidden exhaustion many people around you will never fully understand. You look functional, but internally, the nervous system has not truly recovered in a very long time, which is why sensitive people often feel tired in their souls, not only in their bodies. So tonight, please remember this. Your sleep struggles are not proof that you are failing at life. They are signs that your nervous system experiences the world with extraordinary depth, and perhaps your healing begins the moment you stop demanding that your body function like everyone else's and start giving it the kind of rest it has quietly needed all along. Gentle, consistent, safe enough to finally soften into sleep. Many sensitive people spend enough hours in bed, yet still wake feeling exhausted, because being in bed is not always the same as truly sleeping. The nervous system may remain partially alert all night long, waking briefly, monitoring sounds, processing stimulation, hovering between rest and awareness without fully surrendering to deep sleep. And over time, this creates a painful kind of invisible fatigue. You technically slept, but your nervous system never fully stopped working. This is why sensitive people often need more time for rest than others seem to require. Not because they are lazy, because the quality of recovery is different. Their brains remain active longer, more vigilant, more emotionally engaged with the world even during the night. And perhaps now a deeper truth is becoming clear. Your sensitivity and your sleep have always been connected. The same nervous system that notices subtle emotional shifts, that absorbs stimulation deeply, that processes life intensely, is the same nervous system trying to recover every night while still partially listening to the world. This is not a flaw in your character. It is biology, a highly responsive nervous system naturally requires more restoration, more quiet, more darkness, more gentleness, and perhaps the greatest healing begins when you finally stop fighting this truth, when you stop trying to prove you can function exactly like everyone else, and instead begin giving your nervous system what it has quietly needed for years: permission to rest without guilt. Take a slow breath now. Feel your body growing heavier, the bed beneath you holding more of your weight, your mind no longer needing to solve everything before sleep arrives. There are rhythms moving through everything in life: morning and night, breathing in and breathing out, effort and release, wakefulness and sleep. And your sensitivity belongs to those rhythms too. Sometimes it overwhelms you. Sometimes it allows you to feel beauty more deeply than words can explain. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it becomes your greatest source of empathy, creativity, and emotional understanding. But none of it means you are broken. It simply means you experience life intensely, and tonight you no longer need to apologize for that. Sleep itself may be one of the most healing things your brain does. While you rest, the brain begins cleaning, restoring itself, repairing, reorganizing, releasing the accumulation of the day, especially for sensitive minds that spent hours processing emotion, stimulation, tension, and information more deeply than most people realize. Your brain has been working hard all day long. Of course, it needs restoration. Of course, it longs for quiet. Silence now becomes medicine for your nervous system. Darkness becomes relief. Stillness becomes permission to stop monitoring the world for a little while. Every sense that worked tirelessly all day can finally begin softening its grip. Your hearing no longer needs to stay alert. Your eyes no longer need to process light and movement. Your body no longer needs to brace itself against the pressure of the outside world. And perhaps tonight, your dreams will gently continue the work your waking mind could not finish, sorting emotions, connecting memories, weaving today's experiences into something softer, calmer, more understandable by morning. Not perfectly, but gradually, quietly, the way healing often happens for sensitive people. So let the day dissolve now. You have carried enough, thought enough, felt enough, protected yourself enough. Tonight you are allowed to rest, and the nervous system that works so hard to carry you through this world is finally allowed to sleep too. Tonight, your dreaming mind may continue working quietly beneath awareness. Some dreams may feel soft and comforting. Others may feel vivid, emotional, even strange. That does not mean something is wrong. Dreams are often the nervous system's language for processing what waking life could not fully hold. Your brain sorting emotions, releasing tension, connecting memories, trying gently to make sense of everything you carried through the day. You do not need to control this process. You do not even need to remember it. The mind continues healing whether consciousness witnesses it or not. And now, the night around you is changing. The air feels cooler. Your body senses it instinctively because sleep has always been connected to cooling, slowing, softening. The nervous system recognizes these signals. A cool room, warm blankets, the quiet contrast between the world outside and the safety surrounding your body. Sensitive nervous systems notice these details deeply. The slight coolness in the air, the softness beneath your skin, the gentle weight resting over your body, and little by little, these sensations stop feeling stimulating. They begin feeling safe. Your body no longer needs to analyze every sensation. The sheets become softer, the blanket lighter, the room quieter. Touch slowly fades into the background as the nervous system loosens its vigilance. Your body has been responding to stimulation all day long. Now it no longer has to. Your breathing is slowing naturally now, deeper, longer, more rhythmic. Your heart no longer rushing to keep up with the demands of the world. Your blood pressure softening. Your muscles releasing tension they have been carrying unconsciously for hours. None of this requires effort. The body already knows how to sleep. It has always known. The nervous system simply needed the right conditions to stop defending itself for a while. Darkness, comfort, quiet, safety, understanding, permission. You have given yourself those things tonight, and now your biology can finally begin doing what it was designed to do. The thinking mind softens next. The endless processing slows. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer feel urgent, no longer demanding immediate answers. The mind no longer needs to solve tomorrow before resting tonight. Thoughts drift more slowly now, like distant clouds crossing a dark sky, arriving gently, leaving gently, without needing to be followed, without needing to be fixed, and emotions begin settling too. The emotional intensity you carried throughout the day, your feelings, other people's feelings, the tension, the overstimulation, the invisible emotional weight of being deeply sensitive in a loud world. It can all soften now. Nothing needs to be understood completely tonight. Nothing needs resolution before sleep arrives. Feelings can exist without becoming problems to solve. Your emotional system no longer needs to stay fully activated. It can become quieter now, softer, slower, like water becoming still after hours of movement. And perhaps this is the deepest truth your nervous system has been waiting to hear. You do not need to stay alert forever. You do not need to keep carrying the world into the night. You are allowed to let go now, allowed to rest, allowed to drift, allowed to sleep. And somewhere beneath thought, beneath tension, beneath all the effort of staying emotionally awake through life, your sensitive nervous system is finally beginning to feel safe enough to surrender to the darkness, softly, naturally, one slow breath at a time. Anything unfinished can wait until tomorrow. The emotions, the questions, the responsibilities, none of them need your attention right now. Tonight, they can simply rest beside you without demanding action. And perhaps this is where sensitivity begins, transforming from burden into understanding. The same nervous system that felt overwhelmed all day now recognizes how deeply tired you truly are. The same emotional depth that once exhausted you now allows you to feel compassion for yourself instead of criticism. The same awareness that noticed every subtle tension in the world can finally notice the quiet safety surrounding you here in the dark. Sensitivity was never your enemy. It only became painful when you believed you were supposed to fight it. But your nervous system was never asking to become less sensitive. It was asking to be understood. And perhaps tonight you can forgive yourself for all the years you spent believing something was wrong with you, for the nights you blamed yourself for not sleeping easily, for the mornings you woke exhausted and ashamed, for the countless times you called yourself weak simply because your nervous system needed more care than the world taught you to allow. You were never failing. You were simply carrying more than anyone could see. And now you understand. You need more rest because you process more life, more emotion, more stimulation, more meaning. And there is nothing shameful about that. The darkness around you no longer needs to feel empty or lonely. It can become comforting now, protective, a place where the nervous system no longer has to stay visually alert. No more scanning, no more monitoring, no more absorbing the endless movement of the world. The darkness is not asking anything from you. It is simply holding space for your mind to soften. Somewhere tonight, there are countless other sensitive people lying awake too. People carrying invisible emotional exhaustion into the quiet hours. People who still believe their struggle means they are broken. People who have not yet learned what you are beginning to understand now. That sensitivity is not weakness. That needing more rest is not failure. That a deeply responsive nervous system naturally requires deeper recovery, and perhaps one day they will stop fighting themselves too. Your breathing is becoming softer now, steadier, almost effortless, a rhythm older than thought itself, older than anxiety, older than all the pressure you place on yourself during the day. Your body already knows how to descend into sleep. You do not need to force it. You only need to stop resisting the descent. Every breath carries you further away from the noise of the day, further from effort, further from the constant responsibility of awareness. The weight you are releasing now is not physical alone, it is emotional, mental, the burden of constantly staying alert to life. You no longer need to hold everything together tonight. You no longer need to keep watch over every emotion, every possibility, every unfinished thought. Sleep will hold what you release. Rest will continue the work your conscious mind no longer needs to carry. Science can explain brain waves, sleep cycles, neurotransmitters, emotional processing, but there is something science cannot fully measure: the relief of finally feeling safe enough to let go the peace of no longer fighting your own nervous system, the quiet healing that begins when self-compassion replaces self-judgment, and tomorrow will arrive eventually. The world will return with its sounds, responsibilities, emotions, and movement. Your sensitive mind will notice things again, feel things again, process deeply again. But tomorrow does not exist yet. Right now, there is only this moment, this darkness, this slowing breath, this growing heaviness in your body, this gentle permission to stop carrying the world for a little while. Imagine your nervous system now like thousands of lights slowly dimming one by one, not shutting off abruptly, softening gradually, the mind becoming quieter, the body becoming heavier, awareness dissolving gently into rest. Nothing forced, nothing rushed, just the slow, natural surrender your body has been waiting for all along. And somewhere beneath all the thinking, all the feeling, all the exhaustion, sleep is already beginning to find you. Not every light inside you needs to stay on tonight. Some parts of your mind will continue quietly caring for you, your breathing, your heartbeat, the gentle rhythms that keep life moving even while consciousness fades. But the part of you that has been watching everything all day long, that part can soften now. The awareness, the vigilance, the constant emotional processing, it no longer needs to burn so brightly. Little by little, the nervous system dims its intensity, not all at once, gently, like lights slowly lowering in a quiet room at the end of a long evening. And perhaps this is what darkness truly is. Not emptiness, not loneliness, but relief, a compassionate space where the nervous system no longer has to keep absorbing the world. You were never meant to figure all of this out alone. Not your exhaustion, not your sensitivity, not your relationship with sleep. And maybe one of the most healing realizations is this: there are millions of people whose nervous systems work the same way yours does. People who feel deeply, notice deeply, become overstimulated easily, need more quiet than the world tells them they should. You were never uniquely broken. You were simply carrying a nervous system that requires different care. And the perfect sleep environment is not whatever works for average people. It is whatever allows your particular nervous system to finally feel safe enough to rest. Maybe that means total darkness. Maybe it means silence. Maybe it means soft blankets, cool air, white noise, longer evenings, slower transitions into sleep. None of that is excessive. It is honesty. Your nervous system has always been communicating what it needs. Healing begins when you finally stop arguing with it. And sensitivity itself was never only a burden. Yes, it exhausts you sometimes, but it also allows you to experience life with extraordinary depth, to notice beauty others rush past, to feel music more intensely, to connect emotionally in profound ways, to sense meaning hidden beneath ordinary moments. The same nervous system that becomes overwhelmed also experiences wonder more deeply than many people ever will. The gifts and the exhaustion come from the same place, and perhaps tonight you no longer need to separate them. You only need to care for yourself gently enough that both can exist without shame. Your mind is growing quieter now. The words no longer need to be analyzed, no longer need to be held onto. Understanding has already done its work. Now the nervous system can simply rest inside that understanding. No more figuring things out. No more trying to fix yourself before sleep arrives. Only soft surrender. the slow release into darkness. And every sensitive person's journey with sleep will look a little different. Some nights arrive gently, some require patience, some remain imperfect. But healing rarely begins with perfect sleep. It begins with compassion, with finally understanding why your nervous system struggles, with finally giving yourself permission to need what you need. And tonight, whatever kind of rest arrives is enough. Even this moment of slowing down is healing. Even this quiet is recovery. Everything you learned tonight can drift softly into the background now. The understanding will remain. The self-compassion will remain. The permission to care for yourself differently will remain. But for now, none of it requires effort anymore. Your awareness can soften. Your thoughts can blur gently into stillness. And somewhere beneath all the exhaustion you have carried for so long, your nervous system is beginning to trust rest again. Slowly, quietly, naturally, like the night itself wrapping around you and whispering, "You no longer need to stay awake to deserve peace. You no longer need to hold on to these words now. Let them drift softly into the background, like distant waves fading further from the shore. The understanding has already reached the part of you that needed it. The rest can dissolve gently into silence. Your sensitivity brought you here tonight, not by accident. Your brain learns even when you let go. Your brain has known how to heal itself long before deadlines, long before stress, long before the world taught you to constantly push harder. While you sleep, your brain keeps learning, not through effort, not through pressure, but through silence. Neuroscience shows that deep sleep helps your brain process memories, emotions, and experiences, quietly rebuilding you in the background. And maybe that's the part we forget. You do not have to force everything. Some understanding only arrives when you finally let go. Some healing only happens in the dark. Tonight, you are not being lazy. You are allowing your brain to do what it was designed to do. So breathe deeply, let the night hold you, and rest.